time for our third episode of God Squad. Today I am talking with Chris Aho from North Carolina and Jake Hall in Georgia. Chris and I met, let's say 15 years ago when he was working in Mobile, Alabama, my hometown. And so that's how we finally came into contact with each other, even though we had known each other in Baptist life in the way people do. Jake Hall and I go way back, 21, 22 years ago, from Stanford University, where we took fitness walking together. That's right, we walked for fitness and got college credit for it. And never did I ever think that this man would be in my life professionally all of these years later. And yet here we are talking about life and ministry and faith and work in this time of COVID and sheltering in place. So I hope you enjoy this conversation today with a third round of God Squad. It's good to see you guys. It's been a couple of years, I think, at least.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Chris Aho in North Carolina and Jake Hall in Georgia. Why don't you introduce yourselves, tell us what you're up to, where you're serving, what your work is like right now, and how are you spending your days now that we're in the second month of this COVID shutdown? Chris, you want to go first?
Sure. I am Chris. I pastor Oxford Baptist Church, which is a little church just north. It's not a little church. It's a good-sized church in a smaller town just north of Durham. So Durham, North Carolina is where we do a lot of our life when we're not in quarantine. So I have a wife, got two boys, one of which is in the other room, playing some game on his Wii U, I think, at the moment.
Have your kids gotten into Animal Crossing? Is that part of your life?
Not yet, but it's coming.
I keep hearing about it.
Yeah, we made the most strategic, worst parenting decision in the whole world when in the first week of quarantine, we told the 12-year-old, hey, if you help with little brother, who's 4, we'll get you a Nintendo Switch. And so he's like, great, I've been wanting a Switch. This is fantastic. And so we go online to try to buy a Switch, only to find out you can't buy a Nintendo Switch.
You can't get one. Yeah.
Every day he does the internet search and puts his brother to bed so he can get a Nintendo Switch. Yeah.
Poor Cam. Oh, that stinks.
Yeah. So that's us.
Okay.
Holding out the dream.
Jake, what are you up to?
Hi, I'm Jake Hall. I'm the pastor at Highland Hills Baptist Church in Macon, Georgia. And I have 3 kids and my wife here in the house.
You have 3 kids?
Yes, I do now. We are fostering to adopt a sibling.
I did not know that.
Yes, that is a long story. Yes.
Which we don't have to go into, but that's an exciting plot twist. It's been a while since I've seen you.
Boom. Yes. So this is providing us a lot of time to get to know each other because it's relatively recent.
Yeah, for real. It's a cozy time. Are either of you going into the church with regularity, or are you doing everything from home?
Well, in Georgia, it's important to model what sheltering in place looks like. And so really being intentional about having church in our homes, about not even filming stuff at the church at this point. We did some video work at the church early on and for Palm and Easter that was shot 2 weeks before. But we've tried to really model what life looks like as the church. And so we shoot videos in our homes or we hold live Zoom meetings for worship.
Yeah, so we've been the exact opposite, which is I have a couple folks on staff who can really only do their work at the church, and we have the kind of dispensations that allow them to work at church as they want to. So we carved back our work at Church Expectations and hold a couple office hours a day so people can call and communicate. But basically, 2 of our employees go in every day and they just do what they do because that's what they've always done. And then the other 3 of us who are kind of daily full-time employees are working from home or going in as needed. But then we made the decision to shoot all of our videos in the sanctuary because we wanted to create, like use that as our kind of anchor point. So it's, in a lot of ways, it's the exact opposite of what Jake is doing, but probably comes from the same place, which is how does the church need to be, how do we need to express what our congregation needs as church right now?
Right.
Yeah.
So their church needs modeling, our church needs like an anchor point where we go and this is where we do what we do.
Yeah, things happened really fast here, I felt like. I mean, New Orleans has been in the news, maybe less so now, but initially it was like, we had Mardi Gras, and so everybody got coronavirus, which was really not what the narrative was here during mid-February, because Fat Tuesday was February 25th, and there were people dressed up in, like, it's not funny because we're about to talk about how many people have died now, but people were like in Corona bottles, and like people in their group were slices of lime, and so they were being the coronavirus on Fat. Like it seemed so foreign. It
seemed laughable.
It seemed laughable. It didn't seem close. It was the first Sunday of Lent when 2 people in my congregation emailed and said, what are we going to do about the like greeting time and the coffee time?
Wow.
And at that point, until I honored their concern, and at that point I had people come up to me afterwards and be like, are you seriously afraid of coronavirus? Why are you making that announcement? Because I made an announcement for Sunday of Lent that you could like use elbows or do a fist bump. And then by March 13th, it was my kids came home from school with empty lockers.
Right.
It just happened so fast. Anyway, that's our long ramble to say. So we just did it on Zoom that first week because we weren't ready. There would have been we didn't have live streaming. We didn't have anything in the sanctuary. We didn't have cameras. So I just sat down at my computer and we did a Zoom call because I knew how to do that. And that has ended up being how we do worship, which is lacking in some ways, but it's been great to see each other. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I think what we found in spaces like Zoom is like the intimacy of interaction and being able to see the small details of people listening with you. And that's been good for us. It's been challenging too, because Zoom is not created to host sacred space. It's barely created to share a PDF online and maybe a janky whiteboard. And so we're cramming.
I made some slides for later if we need them.
Yeah, we're cramming a performance into this business application, and people get cranky that it doesn't quite work right. Well, it's not really meant for this, but
we tried to sing a hymn together on that first Sunday, and about halfway through the first verse, I was like, "Oh, this is horrible."
Yeah.
So, for the second verse, I muted everybody and just unmuted one person. But even then, the piano was at one person's house, and the person singing was at another house, and that doesn't work either.
No.
So, I miss that. Which I guess
I muted myself and then just kept mouthing the words until we could soldier through, and then be like, then we just all laughed. Like, that was comically terrible, and we all had a good laugh and moved on.
It is comically terrible. The only part that I have consistently unmuted is the Lord's Prayer. And I find something really great about the cacophony of like one person will come in real loud, and then it's like, and the fact that it zigzags between microphones kind of works for that. But I will say I'm struggling today, and this is really the only important meeting, conversation, anything I'm doing today. And the sun is shining and it's beautiful, and I can't even explain why. I'm like, day 42, it's been 6 weeks, and now here we are making meaning on Zoom. And
but like that's it, right? It's beautiful here too, and yet things feel terrible, and it's the differential between beauty and terror that I think keeps us all in this tiring tension. It's just hard. It's hard to hold those two things together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have already touched on this. So the U.S. as of today has now passed 50,000 COVID-related deaths, according to the testing that we're doing and the numbers that we're tracking. At the same time, Jake, where you are in Georgia, there's a lot of talk of reopening and going bowling and getting your nails did. And there have been protests around the country demanding that the economy reopen. And then I also have friends in Seattle who have said that their offices have now told them prepare to work from home through the summer and begin to anticipate working home through the end of this calendar year. So that's a lot of stuff all over the place. How do we lead in that tension?
Well, there isn't a single trustworthy voice that we can rely on. And that's what's frustrating, is that every industry, every institution, every level of local, state, and federal government seems to be on a different page on what our responses should be. And so, yes, in Georgia, our governor announced that as of today, tattoo parlors, bowling alleys, and massage studios, hair salons, and other really intimate service industry related places can open back up, yet with very little guidelines on how to do that beyond be safe. There's a lot of confusion out there. Locally, here's what that looks like. Our local restaurant groups have decided to remain closed. We have 4 or 5 restaurant groups with multiple restaurants each, have all decided to remain closed, or they maintain curbside ordering only. And then, we haven't had this push here in Macon to stay open because our peak here is weeks away.
Yeah.
We are just now ramping up with temporary hospital beds at all of our hospitals. And we haven't yet hit that peak of death, but it's coming. Testing here is abysmal, and no one really knows what's going on. And so our local leaders have sent a clear message to the governor by way of our Department of Public Health that we really want him to put some restrictions back in place, but it doesn't look like he's going to do that.
Chris, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how do we lead, how do we plan, how do we know what's going to happen more than a week out when we've got this information that's all over the place of we're going to be home to the end of the year, we're going to open businesses right now, we flattened the curve, 50,000 people have died.
Right. I mean, I think that we find ourselves at a little bit of an impossible moment because we don't know what our limitations are at the moment. And the conversation seems to like swing from back and forth from work from home for the next year, like our kids going back to college, like will there be an NFL season, right? So on the one hand, you hear all of that, and those are small conversations, but they're big conversations. And then on the other hand, the other narrative driver is to like reopen the economy, reopen the restaurants. We got to go, get our haircuts. And, but we have yet to have folks provide a set of practices and a set of limitations and a set of guidelines to kind of constrain us in a way that allow us to discern how we move forward. So when you talked at the beginning about like, oh crap, on this Sunday we were going to elbow bump, and by the next Sunday, like I haven't seen anybody in 6 weeks. Like immediately when everything got canceled, a set of constraints went around us that we were forced to organize and design and create within, which was, okay, we know we need to see each other face to face. We know we want to proclaim sort of the word of God. We know we want to sing in some way if we can. And we know we need to provide something as like industrious people who, sometimes joyfully and sometimes reluctantly create something every week to give to a congregation. We know we have to be able to do those things. So Zoom, Facebook Live, upload something pre-recorded to YouTube, email out a resource to all of your people, like that. Those constraints became the creative box that we played in. We have no creative box yet. We have just a bunch of voices hollering, what do we want and what makes us scared? And it's like just those two things going back and forth. And we don't, even our governor, who, like, North Carolina's done really well from curve perspective, from cases perspective, all this kind of stuff. His principles for opening up his phases for opening the state back up, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, are still very vague. So until we get some specifics about what are the expectations that we're going to be living with, we're not going to know.
I'd be curious to know, when does your shelter in place, when do your shelter in place orders end?
We're good through the 8th of May.
Okay. We're technically only like a week beyond that. But I think everyone here expects that it's going to go farther. And the word in New Orleans is that there will be phases of what is opened, and large group gatherings, which worship would be, is late in that process. And they're already talking about fall being a spike. It's Jazz Fest here right now, but you can't have Jazz Fest. So one of the local radio stations, the big WWOZ station, is doing Best of Jazz Fest all day long, like with the blocks for the next few days. And they were going to move it to the fall. And the mayor was saying, we can't control, when you've got tattoo parlors and bowling alleys open in Georgia, you can't prevent people from Georgia to come into town for a festival that we've all been quarantining to protect against. Anyway, so I know all the big stuff here is canceled. And like you were saying, Chris, we don't know what that's going to mean for the Saint season. And I don't know.
I like how you're like, thanks, Georgia.
Thanks, Georgia. Well, we've got Mississippi closer to us, which I'm sure isn't doing us any favors either.
In the scheme of things, it might be just as bad. But that's it. Like, even the federal guidelines, which they are vague as well, forget the state and local, the federal guidelines for gating and for phasing in has congregational type meetings of any gatherings over somewhere between 10 and 50. In the way that we would normally have church, they don't come into play for months, it looks like, in that process. And so do we plan to not have worship as a large group gathering for the rest of the year? Do we have phases of smaller gatherings? I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either. I was on a call, let's say it was yesterday, maybe it was Wednesday. The days have kind of run together this week. So at one of the mini Zoom calls I did this week, another minister in Louisiana was asking, well, when we reopen, what are the safety measures that we're going to take? We're going to have hand sanitizer and we're not going to pass the plate anymore. And I thought, things are changing like well beyond that. I don't even think we need to be making those lists yet. But I wonder, what's your sense of what changes in a forever kind of way? And I don't mean handshaking and hugging. Like, is this some sort of like the proverbial rummage sale where everything changes? Is this going to end up being a kind of reformation? Are we creating something new within something old?
Think about the level of access we've now made mandatory, right? Our people have a growing expectation that now, even like, let's say we could meet tomorrow, like, well, what if they're at their cabin and they still want to pull up to the service? Like, suddenly there's an expectation of universal access that my congregation did not have. Like, we have a tradition of streaming Christmas Eve, and that's really it. And now, like, I think online church is here to stay in some capacity, even if all of this went away tomorrow. The avenues by which our church worships, learns, serves, makes decisions, I think will bear part of this component now.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, we're not like, we're in a both and period of time. We're going to be both meeting in person in some way, and like, we're all movie makers now. We're all televangelists in a small way.
Yeah.
But but what that looks like across the board is going to be very different in every locale. Because what I think it's going to force us to do, what I hope it forces us to do, is to look back locally and say, oh, wait, what does my congregation need from us?
Yeah.
So that we're creating and designing and generating solutions to our congregational needs that meet the needs of our people. And what's going to be hard about that is we're coming out, all three of us are in traditional churches that came out of denominational bodies where it was almost like all right, well, here's how you start a church. You get this number of families, you go here, you do this, and then if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, like, Elizabeth, your church and mine are like way older than the denominational bodies are, even still, we contributed and benefited from that cycle of institutional church. There's not a thing that a denominational body, there are some things that denominational bodies can help me with, but the real answer to like what church looks like on the other side of this is going to be generated from what does my church need as we go through this and as we start to emerge from it. And so it's not quite, in sports they're talking about, well, we'll just play games without fans.
Right.
That'll be our goal. Church can't put that end goal on something and then just be like, all right, we're going to design to that. We're going to figure it out towards that.
Yeah.
Right, because what is that, right? Part of the internal tension that we have is like, do we create increasingly slick videos for consumption by congregate members that's delivered on demand only? And is the goal for us to just keep getting better at that so that if this persists, that's what church is like now? And like, I don't, and then there's the opposite tension of no, we need messy interaction in any way that we can. And those two things are in tension. And so it's really interesting to be in a time where people are both satisfied and dissatisfied with every method that we can deliver this experience to them. Right.
Yeah.
Now we just know that they're satisfied and dissatisfied. Up until 7 weeks ago, we were able to pretend that they weren't completely satisfied and dissatisfied at the same time.
No, I think we knew, but we knew in different ways, right? Like, in the way that you intuit, there's always a carload of people at your church that are going to like you no matter what you do. And there's a carload of people at your church that are going to dislike everything you do, no matter what that is.
Yeah.
And so like, but now we have to like reframe all of those things this season.
Well, I find even part of what I hope I'm doing, I don't know if I am or not, but I hope that I'm giving people permission to kind of lower the bar of their expectations right now. Like, if you need to take a nap, take a nap. If you need to go for a walk, go for a walk. Watch the birds. I put up these videos on Fridays for prayer meditation, and the one today was just about watching the clouds. That's enough for today. If I end this day by sitting in my backyard and trying to see how many birds I can name and watching the clouds, I'll be like, all right, I pulled off a Friday.
Right. The first couple of weeks of this, we have a lot of industrious, active church folk. And it was, how do we have a committee meeting by way of social distancing and figure out how we're going to fix this? I'm like, guys, surviving is our goal. So, take care of yourself and your families, figure out how you're going to do homeschool in your house. Like, this is not the time for us to, call together a de facto church conference to figure out how my church in Macon, Georgia is going to solve COVID.
Yeah.
It is time to figure out, how are you going to get your groceries? How are you going to maintain safety? Let's move down Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
You're way up here in the abstract of what we're used to in community. And let's get back down to like food, shelter, safety, and connection. And,
so if you're in that bottom part of the hierarchy of needs, where you're just wanting to make sure that those basics are taken care of. As a leader, how in the world do you get to that creativity space that's way up higher, where you have some capacity to dream something bigger and better right now?
I mean, daring to dream right now is the work of the leader, but like we're stuck in here, making sure all of the audio settings in Zoom are working, right? And so, like, to be tied to the mundane, it doesn't give you the space internally to be creative. I've been extremely frustrated with that lack of headspace because, like, some of it has to do with the mediums we're working with and our own learning curves. Some of it has to do with the fact that bandwidth across, where our congregants live are always going to impact how they experience things, and you have no control over that.
Yeah.
That and your family and like spousal co-working situations have all changed. Like, it's chaos everywhere. And to try to find a space for creativity to flourish is really difficult for me right now. What about you, Chris?
Well, but here's my fear about that. My fear is that it's not going to get better when we quote unquote go back. The chaos that we're experiencing now will continue until we get to a point where there's some predictability in life. So I do think it's incumbent upon us to find small spaces right now to allow ourselves to be creative, even if it's only 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think Elizabeth, you brought up those disciplines of, discipline to consider the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, right? But I mean, that was your Friday devotional.
That's right.
So, my wife and I took a walk this morning because she was like, I was on a call yesterday and someone said they take a walk, 2 walks a day, one with their spouse without kids, and then one as a family. So she asks me, okay, you want to go for a walk with me before you exercise? And like, you don't say no to that. So I did that and then exercised afterwards. I told her, I was like, I've got a doctoral thesis I've got to finish. And I'm worried that if I have deaths and funerals and memorial services and weddings pile up during this stay-at-home time, then when it's time to go back to work, if I don't engage in discipline practices now, I won't be able to recapture it then. So I have laid out an possible task for all of us, but yet also realizing for me, like, that's some of the task of leadership in this time is to start making space for that.
Yeah. I was also thinking that sounds like an Enneagram 3.
Oh yeah, all day long.
It sounds wonderful and great, and we should all strive for that. It's a lot to achieve and aim for.
Yeah, and so far I've highlighted. I have rediscovered 4 quotes from book highlights that I have made years ago in thesis work, and I did that while I was cleaning my desk while listening to a town hall for Duke Divinity School.
Wow.
So, so I'm not saying I'm I am no paragon of virtue.
Sure.
I've been able to devote
we
about.
We're well aware.
We know you.
I got an hour while multitasking so far today in creative space, but it's a little more than I had yesterday, and I'm gonna put a win in a check in the win.
Absolutely. And I hear what you're saying about it needs to be cultivated and protected, and even if it only comes in 20-minute increments, that's enough. That's good. I'm thinking, Jake, back to you talking about the lack of leadership anywhere. I mean, our mayor is doing a pretty great job, and I really am pleased with our governor. But part of the chaos that people feel is we don't have a strong, like, here's the leader who's really in charge and taking us forward. And I wonder what you think. I'm throwing this to you first, Jake. where is our work in this as ministers? We're not doctors. We're not telling people to inject Lysol into their bodies, right? So when there's a lack of leadership, how do we really define the space and shape of our leadership?
Like, I found it important as Georgia has changed course recently. It was important to say that I almost, honestly, I can't believe I had to put it in an email this week. Like, I had to say, hey, we're still under a shelter in place order, and it's still not safe to come to church. Because what happened in Georgia is that not only did the governor open those specific industries, but he also said, and I'm not going to tell churches what to do. I'm not going to tell churches what to meet. I'm going to tell them to be safe. Well, how do we do that? Right? There are no clear guidelines for churches on how to meet safely. And those that are there say not to meet, right? And so that confusion of trying to thread the needle between the state not telling the church what to do, that completely sets aside any public health issue, has created this ridiculous situation where we have to remind people, hey, we're not experts on this, but even we can see it's not safe for us to meet as a church, even though our leaders have just said, you guys figure it out. We're not going to tell you what to do. And it's that laissez-faire, liberty of saying, hey, we should all have the liberty to do something stupid. So we don't want to tell anybody what to do. So you can go and be reckless in your community. We don't want to, heaven forbid, we tell you what to do if you have the freedom to be reckless. And so, yes, there are no guardrails for our communities, and pastors have to say, as for me and my church, we're not going to meet while it's not safe to meet. And so I'm very thankful that we have our local EMA director in the congregation who is able to give us good advice with both information and expertise, because the hands of our local leaders are tied by the governor's order not to impose local ordinances that are either more strict or less strict than what he said. So our mayor can't fix this for us.
Right.
Here. It's trying to remind people what the best work is. But I don't feel the need to try to explain what the coronavirus is, because I'm a word guy.
Yeah. Well, and I'm an image person and a ritual person, because I'm the 4 on the Enneagram, Chris, and not 2 or 3. I'm the 4. So I want to make sure that we're all getting our feelings communicated, and I have found a real clarity around my role as a faith leader, not a civic leader, not a medical leader, right? And so I'm finding some beautiful surprises in that I think I would say that my leadership team has a real clarity around, okay, here's what it means to be the lay leaders of the church right now. And the deacons have a real clarity around, oh, this is the kind of pastoral and spiritual care we can be providing. So that leads to my next question. What are some of the things that are surprising you in good ways about this time? I have just been delighted by the way the folks at St. Charles are being church. That wasn't something we had to lead a Zoom workshop on. They fell into it, and there has been a real clarity around what matters and what doesn't, and who we are and who we're not. So I wonder what out of this time has been a delightful surprise for you guys.
I always love it when something unexpected creates a new opportunity, right? And so to have our youth provide guerrilla art to the driveways of our senior adults with sidewalk chalk is a joy. Going downtown in Macon and hopping into the line of cars that are honking at shift change to thank the nurses and doctors that are coming off of shift. Those are joyful moments, and they're easy for us to do. The kinds of common communication and interaction, the compassion of picking up the phone and asking someone how they're doing, all of that happens naturally and well in our community, and I'm thankful for it. Most of all, I'm taken back by the people who have emailed or called me or our staff ministers to say, I know this must be a hard time for you too, in a different way. And that's really meaningful. And so I love those little things that give us a glimpse of what compassion looks like, even in the time of COVID.
Chris, have there been any surprises in good ways out of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot more phone calls I wish I could say I was killing it when it came to the calling our homebound people. I have people helping with that. I'm doing what I can. But I also am, in any 2-hour stretch, may end up on 3 to 5 calls with church leaders asking questions about different things that we're working on, different projects. And so there's been a real almost invitation to go a little deeper with people and talk to them on the phone instead of just firing an email, firing a text. I think there's been more emails. There's definitely been more texts. There's been more letters written. All of those things have happened, but spending time on the phone with somebody and talking not just about this thing or that thing, but like, oh, well, what did you watch on Netflix this week? And what are y'all, how are your kids doing? How is your family doing? All of those things have been helpful and beneficial. And then for us, like, we're in a time of, I mean, we're all in the South. So we're in, it's kind of the best time of year for us right now. It's not too hot. Everything's in bloom. Yards and gardens and all that stuff is starting. And, we're fortunate. We moved last summer. And so we've got more yard and are in a neighborhood. So we see people and we go outside. And if that were not the case, we would be rolling into the house at 6 o'clock, 6:30 every night after the kids have been at school and after school programs, shoving food down our throat, washing up, sending them to bed, and then back up at 6:30 the next morning to do it all over again. So the space has been beneficial and it's been a blessing. It's super hard. I mean,
yeah,
I joked on my youngest is 4, and Jake, you have one's younger than that. Like a 4-year-old for rent, anybody? Like, like I'll cut you a real good deal on a rate. But on the other hand, like, he's in a 3-year-old preschool class, which means he's going to full day school at 3 and sometimes isn't picked up till 5:25 every afternoon. So these are hours I won't get back. And I don't know what the quarantine and what COVID looks like. I don't know what the history books say about this 10 years from now, but I hope my kids feel like, mom and dad were around for that whole time. It was kind of fun. Which again, and then check my privilege and all of those things.
I know. Yeah.
But we're trying to find the gifts.
That's right. And it is a luxury and it is a privilege to be able to say, well, if we're home 6 months, 9 months, I'll get a paycheck. My husband will get a paycheck. The kids will be fine. And so there is a call to action in that we can't just be taking care of ourselves. Of course, we're called to be working for equity and justice across our cities. But I think a couple of the things that I've heard y'all say is there's an opportunity here to really be hyper local. Not that we don't care about global, but I can't do the work in Macon, Georgia right now. That's not where I am, but I can work on policies and even simple things about how do we get groceries to neighbors here. So there is a call out of that privilege to work for equity in our spaces. But I wonder, some of what you were just saying, Chris, made me think maybe that's some of the normal we don't want to go back to. Do we want to go back to 12 hours a day where we're not with our families? I don't know. I wonder, I hope maybe that there might be some rhythm and balance. And I love what you said about going deeper in our communities, that church is not just one more place where you do tick that box, but that it's a group of people that you go deeper with. I love that.
Yeah, I hope we do. I hope we will see the importance of stopping and resting and reflecting. I hope we will see the importance of relationships that we don't just take for granted. And that's not a church growth strategy, but I think it will help grow a healthier church.
Yeah.
And hopefully healthier communities. And, instead of us just being tugged and pulled all the time, like we kind of are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've heard mention of going for walks and watching the birds and watching the clouds. How are you staying centered? If you are staying centered, if you have moments where
That's
you're able
presumptive.
to return to some rooted, centered place, what gets you there, and how are you protecting and cultivating that?
I need moments like this. So I need my pack back again. The isolation kind of shuts me down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I desperately need community and conversation like this. I think when I can stop worrying and, as you said, look at the clouds, experiencing nature. Right now is a joy where we are when it's not raining. We've had a lot of rain. Family walks have been great for us, for our family, which in our particular family, as we are wed together in this season, learning to walk in faith and line together is a very meaningful thing, to head out around the loop of our neighborhood together. It feels fraught with meaning. And so those are great things for me. I'm cooking more now, and that's fun. And it's in those simple things that I have taken great delight.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would add anything, to that. I would say I love it when I get text messages and phone calls from my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I do love, I mean, I've just been for a long time, have had to get up and do some sort of exercise to start my day. That kind of got me through a tough spell a handful of years ago, and it was a practice I kept. So I'm grumpy if I don't know that there is a bike ride that has happened or is going to happen. So that's friends, bike rides, and then managing family. Yeah. What I would like to add to my list is when I need to read more. I don't read very much, and I need to read, even if it's just 15 minutes to read. So I'm trying to do that.
Has your oldest read the Rick Riordan books, Chris?
Just the pyramid.
Percy Jackson is the first one. There's a Greek series, and then Roman, and there's Norse, and now he's brought in people from different cultures around the world, bringing in like Asian, Indian, Latin American mythologies. I was thinking, like, one of the things that I think is really fun is to read with my kids, like maybe in parallel, so that we can talk about it. So my son, when he was, fifth, sixth grade, maybe, is when he started those Percy Jackson books. And it's all these kids in our time who find out that they're demigods. So they have a human parent and a Greek or Roman or Norse god parent. They're super duper fun. Clearly not academically challenging, right? And it's something that we did together for a while that I miss that. So just throwing that out as a fun thing that could connect families.
We are hip deep in the Harry Potter series right now. So Logan, our 7-year-old, is on book 6.
Ooh.
He tore through.
Is he reading it himself, or are you reading it to him?
Reading it himself.
Wow.
He lets me read it with him at night, but then he'll sneak off during the day and tear through a few chapters. But he's also reading the Egyptology version of that series you're talking about.
Oh, the Riordan stuff. Yeah. I think
so
they're really fun.
Oh, he loves it. He's coming back asking about all these gods that I barely remember.
That's cool.
From like world history or something. But yeah, that's been a delight to see.
Yeah, book 6 is getting real dark. That's one that I never watched the movie of it, and I never reread the book because I couldn't do it a second time.
I was worried about him in the last book when Sirius Black dies.
Yeah.
And so like we were pacing it and I was like, I want to read this with you.
Yeah.
And then he stole the book and read it one afternoon. He came in, he's like, why didn't you tell me he was going to die? I'm like, thanks for reading ahead, buddy. But he's faring fairly well right now.
Well, you're easing me into these last couple of questions here about playfulness and laughter. And I think that probably all of us are finding some of that in family. Are there other sources, podcasts, shows that bring you some moments of joy?
Oh, well, okay. 1 second. After ESPN the other night aired the Jordan documentary, I dug through my
Nice.
Nice.
Found my childhood Jordan.
That's fantastic.
So I'm looking forward to that. You know, we all have friends that are like super crazy sportsy people. So I'm not gonna like face tweet about it or anything, but it was really fun to relive that. So on Twitter every morning, I take a selfie with, I think, Brian Koppelman, who writes Billions and who wrote Ocean's 13 and wrote Rounders. We have the Royale.
I love
every morning,
Rounders.
which is great. Yeah. So first cup of coffee every morning is called the Royale. And so take a picture. That's super fun. And get, he like retweets and likes everybody. And so that's been kind of fun. And then I've been trying to just watch my 4-year-old because he's hilarious, and 4-year-olds are just ridiculous. This morning he finished his Cheerios, and I think he was intentionally drinking the milk, but he had like a little iPad thing. It's not a real, anyway, whatever. He's watching some PBS Kids show on a screen because we've devolved into that point, and he's like drinking
No judgment here.
the milk out of
No
Honey Nut Cheerios milk with a spoon while watching this thing. So there's that. Oh, we have bunnies in our yard. We have 2 baby bunnies, and a parent bunny that is around. So that's a little bit of joy.
That's cool.
So yeah, we kind of have a lot of like little things going on that are kind of fun.
A friend turned me on to Staying In with Emily and Kumail. That's a podcast with Emily V. Gordon and Kumail Nanjiani. I don't know if y'all.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. And she has a pre-existing immunocompromised thing going on. And so he's been really paranoid about the coronavirus. So it's been good for me to listen to their anxiety about that, but then also all of the things that they're doing to occupy their time. But I think my favorite part is that Kumail refers to the time before all of this as pre-Hanks Wilson, meaning the night that we all found out that Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson had it was the night that changed everything. And he sings it like the George Jetson song. So he'll say pre-Hanks Wilson. And I find myself all the time, maybe not out loud, but thinking it in my head like, oh, that was pre-Hanks Wilson. Pre-Hanks Wilson. So some podcasts.
That is the moment right there. It's when everybody's like, whoa. Tom Hanks has it?
That's right. The president made some big speech that night that I remember nothing. But I remember the breaking news right after was that Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson were in Australia and had it, and everybody understood it was serious. So
what does it say about us that like the moment we think it's serious is when a celebrity gets it?
I know.
Because I remember thinking too, like Idris Elba has it. Oh no.
We have to protect Idris.
To Luther.
Well, and that was I happened to be home. Natalie and I were talking, we're on the couch, and I had ESPN on, which I don't normally have on just in the background, as they were canceling the basketball game at the same time that Hanks and Wilson were being announced that they had it. And it was, it was like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. And
it was a big, like 6 hours, 12 hours where everything shut down. Yeah. Well, this has brought me joy. Thank you. I enjoy you guys so much. Thank you for also offline from this texting and checking in and calling and reminding me that my job is just to do the work that's right here in front of me. I think you're both really good at that. And you're excellent pastors and friends. And I'm really grateful for this time together today.